Hello and welcome to Story Recap. For this episode, let's talk about what happened in I Am Wrath. So big time spoilers ahead, watch out. The film opens with news channels reporting on rampant gang violence and killings in Columbus, Ohio. More than 300 shootings occurred that year and nearly 50 deaths, with gangsters getting involved in city crimes. Later, Governor Mercerf declares a new peace for the city. After he succeeds in having the crime rate, Governor Mercerf confronted protesters about the proposed pipeline, who also announced that his office had commissioned a special environment review for comparison with the Environmental Protection Agency. Abby and her family watch the press conference and are excited because the governor has mentioned the work her mother Vivian is doing in auditing. A few days later, Vivian went to the airport to pick up her husband, Stanley, who is returning from a job interview in California. In the next scene, the family is having a tire problem. A stranger approaches them to ask for money, but Stanley refuses. Suddenly someone attacked Stanley from behind. While they were savagely beating him, one of them stabbed Vivian and stole her bag before fleeing. A badly injured Stanley gets up and runs to Vivian, only to find her dead. He goes to the police station to report the criminals to Detectives Gibson and Walker. Stanley goes to the church to say goodbye to his wife. Vivian's death made national headlines. This prompted Governor Mercerf to send condolences to her family. The next day, Stanley returned to the police station at the request of the investigators. In order to identify the criminals involved in the accident, he recognized the criminal. Despite the positive selection, the two investigators released the criminal, saying that there was not enough evidence. When he returns from the police station, he meets his daughter to inform her of police corruption. Later, he returned to his home and smashed the wall of the wardrobe. He revealed a black envelope full of different passports, foreign commissions, and deadly weapons. His wife left behind a mysterious past before marrying him. He visits the barbershop and meets Dennis, his former Special Forces buddy of 20 years. Dennis reveals that the police arrest criminals 10 times a year. But the strange thing is that nothing happened to them at all. Stanley's first move was to disguise himself as a gangster and get rid of one of the criminals, Nathan, in a nightclub. Nathan is seen giving his girlfriend the stolen bag taken from Vivian in the parking lot. As Stanley watches Nathan closely, he becomes increasingly anxious under his piercing gaze. Later, a chase occurs between Stanley and Nathan. He overpowers Nathan, while Hope prepares to kill him. Nathan hints that his wife's murder was more than just a robbery. Later, Dennis arrives, and they dispose of the body and burn it. Unbeknownst to them, one of Nathan's gang members recorded what they did on camera. He immediately alerted the notorious civil crime lord named Lemmy K, where he cut off the informant's finger, claiming that he should have helped Nathan instead of filming him. He then orders his men to inform Charlie, the man responsible for Vivian's death. Later, Dennis and Stanley head away to the barbershop's basement, a secret training room and weapons cache from his days as a member of Special Forces. Finding the broken phone they recovered from Nathan's corpse, Dennis hacks into the device and exposes the contacts, suspecting that it could belong to Charlie or one of his accomplices named Lars. They called the number and found out it belonged to the tattoo shop where Lars works. Meanwhile, Lemmy K contacts Detectives Gibson and Walker. He demands that they find the culprits responsible for Nathan's murder. It is revealed that the detectives are corrupt and Lemmy K is working to keep his men out of jail, in exchange for his silence over a video concerning the governor's son Mercerf. In the video, it appears that the governor's son commits murder against his girlfriend after giving her drugs. Lemmy K told them he would publish the leaks if the two detectives did not find the people responsible for killing his men. Afterwards, Gibson meets with the governor and tells him about Lemmy K's men. The governor orders the two detectives to find the people responsible for the murder in order to prevent the video from being leaked. Meanwhile, Stanley arrives at the tattoo shop, aiming to kill Lars. On the other hand, Denise is rushing to his store when he hears the alarm. He comes face to face with Charlie and his gang, and he succeeds in defeating them. Bullets rain down on his fellow gang members, while Charlie escapes unharmed. Back at Stanley, Lars becomes increasingly suspicious when Stanley keeps mentioning Charlie's name. He asks him to reveal his identity. It ended up cutting Lars' neck. Then he robs a shipment of Lars' drugs and meets up with Denise at a hiding place for dead bodies. Later, Stanley heads to the church, where he confesses his sins to the priest and begs for forgiveness. Meanwhile, Abby arrives at Stanley's house to collect Vivian's belongings, but before she and her husband can leave, they are ambushed by Charlie and his men. They fired at her car and injured her husband. Stanley arrives just in time. In the next scene, the governor orders the appointment of a specialized team to get rid of the chaos. Meanwhile, Lemmy K gets angry when he learns of the drug theft, so he issued a warning to Charlie. Later, Stanley manages to get Charlie's phone number by stealing Lars' phone. Stanley tells him he'll return the stolen goods, and Charlie forces him to go to a Korean club, where he is waiting for him with Dennis. The matter quickly got out of hand, as the man and his bodyguard drew their weapons. Stanley burst into the VIP room uninvited. He manages to trap Charlie. He asks him for answers regarding Vivon's murder. He ends Charlie's life after learning of Lemmy K's involvement. The next day when Stanley returns home, he discovers a shocking report revealing that Vivon has worked with the governor. She was forced to jeopardize public water safety in order to make profits. Later he listens to his wife's voicemail. He finds out that she was pressured by the governor to hide the truth. Meanwhile, as Abby and her family are trying to leave, they are suddenly ambushed by Lemmy K and his men. He forces Lemmy K to call her father. With a bold move, Abby tries to protect herself and her family by attacking them, but Lemmy K takes revenge and shoots his son Abby. Under pressure from Lemmy K, she sends a text message to Stanley using her son's surname, Joey, instead of Jimmy, in order to warn him of the danger. He understands the content of the text message. Upon his arrival, he snuck in through the back door. However, Lemmy K takes Abby hostage, forcing Stanley to give up his weapon. Fortunately, Dennis arrives in the nick of time and shoots Lemmy K. Events accelerate and one of Lemmy K's men shoots Dennis, but he can eliminate men, and on the other hand, Stanley managed to defeat Lemmy K. He tries to get information about his wife's murder, but before he can confess, corrupt Detective Gibson kills him, which leads to a confrontation with the detective. Gibson ends up tied to a car and they head to the governor's mansion. He reveals the truth about Lemmy K and the governor. When they arrive, Stanley rigs the car to explode. Walker barely manages to escape from the trunk of the car, where he was previously held captive by Stanley. Finally, the confrontation between the governor and Stanley took place. The governor immediately shot and Stanley shot him, as he confesses that he was the one behind Vivon's murder, because she refused to help him in his corrupt schemes. Enraged, Stanley stabs and kills the governor. Later he leaves the house. He waves the governor's gun. When he is ordered to drop it, he aims it at the officers, prompting them to shoot him, but he miraculously survives because he is wearing the bulletproof vest Dennis gave him. Abby was denied her father's visit, but she burst into the room and hugged him. Later that night, 2 police officers are stationed outside Stanley's hospital rooms. Walker sneaked into the room to kill him. He accuses him of trying to escape while pointing his gun at him. We find out that Abby gave her father a gun when she entered the room earlier, so he shoots Walker. The movie ends with Dennis sneaking into the room as a doctor and he and Stanley escape to Sao Paulo, Brazil. If you want interesting movie recaps like these, like, share, and subscribe to follow us for more movie recaps.